Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, Professor Thorgy, your guide to all things geeky, although today, just call me Dr. Love, your guide to love. You know what, in retrospect, let's not call me that and never speak of it again. It was very stupid, and I apologize, especially if you happen to find what I just did sexy in any way, shape, or form. You're going to lead a very hard life with your incredibly low standards. But forget about all that. It's time for Comic Class, everyone. That's right, Comic Class, the show every single week on this channel where we just geek out about comic books. However, it's also Valentine's Day. This is the first time since we've been doing Comic Class that happened to line up with Valentine's Day. So I wanted to do something special for that, and I was thinking about doing a top 10 countdown of the best couples in comics. Except that we just got done with the month of January, and every single January we do a month-long retrospective of the previous year, meaning we do about 3 or 4 top 10 countdowns every single week during the month of January. So I feel like if we came in here and immediately did another top 10 countdown, you guys would probably lose your minds. Also, the top 10 videos tend to take a really long time to put together, which means I would probably still be working on it on Valentine's Day itself in order to get it up by the end of the day. And no offense, guys, I love you, I appreciate all your support. I love my wife way more. No way was I going to have her skip Valentine's Day so that I could get you guys another top 10 countdown. So we're not doing that. Plus, that means I would also have to talk more about Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and every time I do that, I get really sad. So I decided that instead of doing that, I would just talk about my 3 favorite romance comics out there. Now, these are not my 3 favorite romances in comics, by which I mean comics that just happen to have a romance in them. These are not individual issues of 100-issue long series that really spotlight a good romance. No, these are comics where the entire point of them was the romance. It was a love story in comic book form. It was not a story about a guy going out there dressed as a spider, fighting a dude dressed as a giant lizard, but he also happened to have a date on Friday night, and those two ended up hooking up and becoming a real cute couple. No, this is a book specifically about a romance being formed, and that's the entire point of it. But yes, this is a brand new thing that we've never really done on this channel. This is not a list of my top 3. It's just me talking randomly about 3 issues. But you guys have also been asking me to go back and talk about older issues, things that aren't just specifically new comics. So we're gonna kind of test the water on that today. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about this. Would you like to see more videos kind of like this? But we're going to start with Scott Pilgrim. Now, I don't really know if I even really have to pitch Scott Pilgrim to you guys, because I feel like if you're really into geek culture, you know about Scott Pilgrim. He's kind of the poster child for this entire community of ours, which is kind of a sad thing, because Scott Pilgrim is kind of a loser, but that's the point of his character, and that book really captures it perfectly. But what Scott Pilgrim is about is about this guy who he is just bumming through life. He is at that point that we kind of all go through at some point where we don't know what we're doing. We're just kind of going from one gig on to the next. He's got a band with his friends, and they're gonna be big someday. Maybe, who cares? I don't know. It's not important to him. He just wants to keep playing his video games. But one day, he meets this girl, Ramona Flowers, and she brings so much life into his world. It is one of those instances where he just sees her and he is immediately head over heels in love with her. She is his dream girl. And I mean that literally, because the first time they meet is when she is using interdimensional doorways to go through his dreams. Yeah, it's, you know, it's not very subtle about the metaphors in this book. However, Scott is already dating another girl, a girl who is way too young for him, and she does that thing that a lot of people do when they're dating an older person who seems so mature and so advanced for them. They just look up to them and just praise them, and they're their entire world. Yeah, Scott's kind of an asshole. I've already mentioned this, but I feel like it needs to keep coming back up. However, that's the entire point of this book. It's about him kind of learning, yeah, I was kind of a jerk. And they even go into his past relationships and kind of show like, yeah, this is where that all started. This is what that all kind of led into. This has been the progression of how he ended up becoming just this loser character. But the entire series is about him by being in a relationship with Ramona Flowers, eventually learning self-esteem, self-control, basically how to be a better person, which that's what a good relationship should do. It should teach you how to be a better person. So I think they captured that part of what being in a relationship is all about pretty darn well. However, the thing that they do the best in this book is that Scott Pilgrim is set in a world where video game rules apply. You get power-ups, you get coins by beating people, you can see health bars, stuff like that. It's a very interesting take on this fantasy world that they've created, but Ramona has 7 evil exes, and Scott has to fight them all if he wants to actually be able to go out with Ramona. Now, I mentioned that this book is not that subtle with the metaphors, but this is one of the best metaphors I have ever seen for being in a relationship. We can all come in here and say like, oh, we're so mature, we're beyond any of that, I don't have to compare myself to the person who I love's exes. No, my partner's exes don't come across my mind at all. That's a load of crap. Every single person out there at one point in time will think, yeah, so what was the deal with you and this last person that you dated? Just because, yeah, we're all insecure beings on some level. No matter how mature you are, some voice in the back of your head will always go, was this guy better than I was at this thing? And that's what this entire series is. When he is actually having to fight her superpowered evil exes, yeah, it's not so much a story about him actually having to fight them, it's more of just a metaphor for, can he actually get over this? Can he actually deal with the fact that she used to date a guy who is kind of a celebrity now? She dated a guy who was a vegan, and in this world, he gets superpowers from being vegan because that just makes him better than everyone else. But that's of course not supposed to be real. That's supposed to be a metaphor for, oh, I'm kind of a lazy piece of crap who just eats junk food all day, and she used to date a guy who was in the best shape imaginable. He had an amazing diet. Does that just make him a better person than I am? As I said, comparing yourself to your partner's exes is going to be a part of any relationship out there. It doesn't matter how secure you are, it doesn't matter how much you know, yeah, they're never going back to their old exes, I don't have to worry about them. It will still be some thought that crosses your mind at some point in time, and it's going to be something that you yourself have to get over. This was a comic entirely about that part of being in a relationship, and it's not really something that we ever really see any story out there delve into that much. And typically when they do, it's some crappy rom-com that just uses poor jokes to try and talk about the subject. This one took that subject and turned it into giant video game boss fights, and that actually turned it into one of the best metaphors for that stage of a relationship that I've ever read in a comic. And like I said, the entire point of this book is to show this guy who is a loser eventually learning to become a better person, and learning how to get over your partner's exes is part of making you a better person. But also, it shows Ramona herself getting over her exes, of cutting off the ties to them, of actually her becoming a better person than her exes and no longer being controlled by them. So it's not just a story about Scott's progression, it's also a story about Ramona's progression as well, which again, that's what a good romance story should be. It should show both people in the relationship actually growing together. And I think that Scott Pilgrim was always something that kind of nailed that. If you've never read the Scott Pilgrim series, you can always find it in the original black and white version, but they also released it in color, and honestly, putting it out in color doesn't take anything away from it. I think the colors are actually really damn good in this. But also, if you just don't feel like buying all those books, we all know about the Scott Pilgrim movie, and it was fantastic, and honestly, it really captured the voice of that comic. I've always said that the Scott Pilgrim movie is 95% perfect. I've always said it is 10 minutes away from being a perfect 100, because I always felt like they just needed about 10 extra minutes in that movie to just flesh out all the supporting characters in there and these characters' past relationships. But even without those 10 minutes, yeah, this is an A-class movie. It is a fantastic love comedy? That's not the word. Romantic comedy. There we go. And if you've already read Scott Pilgrim and you want something kind of similar to it, I always point to Lucky Penny. That's the second book that we're talking about today, and I've always described Lucky Penny as being the spiritual successor to Scott Pilgrim. It does not follow the same rules as Scott Pilgrim. It's not set in a video game world. I will admit, at the very end of the series, there is kind of a boss fight that almost feels like it comes out of nowhere. And that has always been one tiny complaint that I've had about that, like, boss fight that comes at the end of this book didn't really match the tone of the rest of the series. However, the rest of the series, it's got an amazing quirky sense of humor. It does capture that point in your life where you're just kind of bumming around, just trying to figure out what comes next. However, it's not a story about video games in the real world. It's a story about this girl, Penny, who just happens to have the worst luck imaginable. And I know that sounds like a quirky concept, but they take it beyond quirky and actually make it flat out hilarious. This book actually made me laugh out loud probably more than any other book I've read in the last year. If you just want a really solid comedy, Lucky Penny is a great pick for it. And a lot of that comes from the art style itself. I mean, the writing is definitely solid. However, the artist, Yuko Ota, is able to capture the humor that is written in this book with this fun, poppy, upbeat style to it, but not like cartoonish style. It's just a very lively style. It is a style that makes all these jokes just bounce along from the next one to the next, while at the same time being able to capture the, I hate keep using this word, but just the quirkiness of this character. Penny is a very unique individual. She doesn't just have bad luck. She has a collection of old romance novels that she keeps reading, and she kind of views the world through these old romance novels. Like, for again, comparing it to Scott Pilgrim, where Scott Pilgrim was about this guy who was a big video game nut and he kept viewing the world as a big video game. It's kind of like that, except with romance novels. So, you know those old, like, you had Fabio on the cover with his shirt wide open and hair just flowing? Imagine the humor of taking something as crazy as that and just converting it into the way that you're viewing the real world. There is an amazing dream sequence in here after Penny ends up failing at a Dungeons and Dragons game of how she converted that into her big old romance novels. So yeah, I absolutely loved seeing all the crazy stuff that they were able to come up with for this character and the way that she was interacting with this world. But also, just the fact that she has such terrible luck, it's so charming. It's something that makes you want to keep rooting for her, because her luck is so bad that it'd be easy to look at her and go, well, yeah, but if you were more responsible, you'd be able to deal with this. But no, she just has really awful stuff just continuously happen to her. Like, at the beginning of this book, she is moving into her new place. Her new place is a storage locker, and not a good one at that. Yeah, her life is taking a really rough turn. She is working at a laundromat and her boss is a 12-year-old, so she constantly has a 12-year-old just talking down to her, but because it's the kid of the people who own the company, yeah, she can't really do much about it. It's a rough existence. Like, I love the romance in this book, but also if you just want a really solid slice of life series, Lucky Penny is a great pick for that as well. But as I said, we're talking about romances today. So aside from this book just being incredibly charming with its protagonist and all of her adventures, it is a story about her forming a relationship. And the guy who she forms a relationship with, he's basically kind of a stable individual. He's a guy who works at a library. He's very quiet, he's very calm, he's not the big crazy person that kind of matches Penny in her personality. He is very much the perfect balance to who she is, because she kind of needs someone to tap her down because her life is just such a mess. She needs someone who is stable, and seeing Penny try to adapt to his stability is incredibly humorous. Like I mentioned, the Dungeons and Dragons scene in here is a fantastic moment in this book because he has to babysit his younger brother and all of his friends, and they're gonna play Dungeons and Dragons, and he's going to be the dungeon master. So she comes over and is like, yeah, great, I can do that. She has no idea how to do that. So she's just trying to fake her way through a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and she is screwing up everything constantly. And I've said the word charming. This is one of the most charming moments in this book, because you're looking at it, it's like, she is such a mess. She is such a human garbage fire, but she's trying so hard, and it really makes you want to root her on. So I mentioned that Scott Pilgrim is all supposed to be a metaphor about how you become a better person by getting over your partner's exes and realizing you don't have to compare yourself to them. This is a book about being an absolute mess and you're trying to make yourself a better person, and you find that person who is a perfect match for you because they're going to help you become a better person, but yeah, things just keep going so horribly wrong. But the romance itself is captured very well because, as I said, these two, they are a unique balance. They do actually even each other out. They do actually bring something into each other's lives that the other one needed. And I think one of the reasons why that's captured so well is because this book is written by Anand Hirsch and drawn by Yuko Ota, and those two are actually a real-life married couple. They actually did a webcomic for the longest time called Johnny Wonder, and that actually recently came out in trade as well. I picked that up, and towards the end of that, you actually see their relationship forming, you see them getting married, and it's actually incredibly heart-touching. It was a nice little peek into their lives, and they were able to capture it well in their little webcomic that was a perfect slice of life series. Now, Lucky Penny was a webcomic that got turned into an original graphic novel when it was all wrapped up. Scott Pilgrim was a series of original graphic novels, and it's all wrapped up. The final series that I'm going to talk about is an ongoing series, and it's still ongoing. You've probably heard about this because every single year when people mention their favorite books of the year, it's always in their top 10. It is one of the most praised books out there, Saga. Now, let me just go ahead and kind of address the elephant in the room. I mentioned that so many other people always put these books in their top 10 every single year. And if you've watched my personal top 10 comics list for the past 3 years, you know, Saga, it's always on there, but it's always around like the 40s, the 50s. I do really enjoy this book. I would not have put it on that top 100 list if I did not enjoy it, if I did not think it was something special. I would not be talking about today if I did not think it was something special. But yeah, I do have problems with the book that I don't think other people really have. Namely, all the freaking time skips that they keep doing in this series. Yeah, that's always been kind of a problem to me. However, something that I do not have a problem with, and one of the reasons why I do think that this book is special, is the romance in this book. But the thing that makes this book so special isn't just a romance, it's all the romances. Because this is not just the story of a couple falling in love, it's the story of love in general. This entire book is meant to be a metaphor and a message about different parts of love. Every single character in this book looks at love or experiences love in different ways, and they all kind of capture different sides of it because that's the thing. Love is complicated. Love is not one thing. Yes, there might be certain aspects to being in a relationship that we can all relate to. As I mentioned with Lucky Penny and with Scott Pilgrim, there are things in that book that everybody, no matter what relationship you're in, you've gone through that at some point in time. However, the actual process of being in a relationship, what a relationship means to everybody else, what it means to each individual person, what love means to everybody out there, it's something different. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. And the thing about Saga that makes it so special is that every single character out there experiences love in a different way, and they use that to show all the different sides of it. For example, the protagonists of this series, Alana and Marco, both come from different worlds. One of them comes from a world that is mostly technology, one of them comes from a world that is mostly magic, and these two worlds have been at war forever. But the two of them actually met during this war, and they actually bonded over a book that everyone else thought was trash, but both of them thought this book was amazing. They thought it was something truly special. And I don't mean that in like a religious way, like, oh, this is the one true word. They're like, no, this is just a damn good book that talks about a lot of stuff that we relate to. I relate to this, no one else relates to it. Wait, you relate to this too? Did we just become best friends? So yeah, it's something like that. That's one of the things that I love about this series. Yeah, the idea of a planet that's all technology and a planet that's all magic actually going to war with each other, that's a big, crazy sci-fi thing. At the heart of this, though, it's about two people who meet and they bond because they love a book. A very relatable human thing. This is a series that goes to crazy places in space and time, and yet, at the heart of it all is a very human story about love. But they end up splitting apart from both of their armies, they run away, they fall in love, and they have a child. So yes, there is kind of the Romeo and Juliet aspect to them, but the main thing that they are as our protagonists, they're the young married couple. And they go through young married couple things, even though this story goes through crazy twists and turns. Like there was a moment in which they get separated from their daughter, and their daughter ends up going into prison. That's something that not most parents have to go into. They don't have to look for their child on another planet that they don't know exists, only to find that they're trapped in some prison. That doesn't typically happen. But even within the middle of all that, it's still just a story about these young parents raising their young daughter. And they go through the things that young parents go through with a young daughter. And their relationship goes through different twists and turns that any relationship would go through now that you have a child. Yeah, they actually capture what it's like to be a young married couple perfectly. I think that they capture so many sides to that so many people actually end up going through. However, as I said, that is one side of love. That is one love story. That is one adventure that some people will go on when they fall in love. There are so many other characters in here who experience love in completely different ways. Like they're being hunted by a bounty hunter called the Will, and the Will is in love with another bounty hunter called the Stalk. And yeah, they're kind of just, for lack of better terms, buddies. They're just that couple that never got hooked up, that never actually ended up forming a relationship. At least not a successful relationship. They do mention that they have tried it several times throughout here, but they end up just constantly meeting just to hook up over and over again. That is also a side of love, because love can be complicated. And there are also 2 reporters in this book, and the reporters are trying to hunt down this story about Lana and Marco, because oh my goodness, someone from this plant hooked up with someone from this plant? Oh, that's a big story. But they have their own story about love, because they're actually a gay couple, and they come from a planet where being gay is illegal and punishable by death. So that captures what it's like to have a love that the government is telling you is wrong. Something that a lot of people across the world unfortunately have to go through. So it's giving a voice to that side of love. Or what about their daughter, Hazel? As I said, there are a lot of time skips in this book, so you do actually watch her growing up, and we have now finally gotten to the point in which we are actually getting to watch her experience young love. We're getting to experience her first love. We're getting to see all those memories of what this is going to mean for her one day down the road starting to form, because this entire story is actually told from the point of view of an adult Hazel. It's her looking back at her younger life, starting with her birth and basically telling her story, and we've gotten to that point in which she is now going, yeah, that was the first boy that I ever kissed, and you can kind of see like how you look back at that kind of thing, how you remember those parts of your life. So I honestly feel that out of all the romance books that I've read in my life, Saga probably does it better than anyone else, because despite being a book where they go and fight giant salamander monsters and battle with magic and fight giant cyclopses with huge exposed, you know what, I don't need to get into the graphic side of this book. Despite just being a really crazy sci-fi fantasy series, it's one of the most human looks at love that I've ever seen, because it realizes you can't tell the story of what love is through just one character. You need an entire universe full of crazy, messed up individuals, because that's what love is. It's something different to every single person out there, and it's going to leave you in a completely different way than it found you. So that is it for our look back at some of my personal favorite romance books out there. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below, and if you have someone special to share this Valentine's Day with, make sure that you treat them right, make sure you get them something special, make sure that you tell them how much they mean to you. And if you don't have anyone special out there this Valentine's Day, who cares, man? Treat yourself right. Go out there and do something special for you. Get all your single buddies together and go and do something fun. Because remember, love takes many forms. Self-love, also very important. No one take that out of context, you dirty pervs. I know what you're all thinking. Anywho, let me know what you thought of today's episode. If you want to see more stuff like this where I just give you random recommendations, not so much current books, but just anything that I enjoy talking about, in the comments below, or on Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr at Professor Thori. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. Bye.